Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest soldering tutorial. As always, thanks for your time, for tuning in, it's really appreciated. Now I've had a few people ask me lately if I can just show a simple video showing a few common surface mount parts where people might be starting off in their surface mount journey, and yeah, hopefully these short videos can help them out. Now there are a few various components. We're going to start with these 1206 capacitors you can see in the centre, and we're going to finish up with a 64 pin quad flat pack. We'll talk about different solder sizes, different soldering iron tips that I like to use on the way through, and yeah, hopefully the methods I show can be useful. So I'm going to start with this one. So what I do first, as you can see, I've roughly laid the components in position, and now I add some flux on both these pads at this end. Just use a plastic cable tie to apply my flux. Now I never pre-blob the flat, sort of preload, pre-blob the pads like a lot of people do and then enter the component. All I do, I just get a small amount of solder on my tip, iron tip, and I literally tack them in position just central. Start this one down here. So that's all I'm looking to do. I'm not looking to get the right amount here. What I do, I'll get this end tacked in position. Just centralise this up and get that tacked on. That's the first stage that I do, literally just tack them in dead central to the pads. Now what I then do is turn the board round so you can see the other end. We do the other end properly and then we revisit this first end to get that finished off. Now this is how I do all my components, i.e. you can see this capacitor down here. There's these little 402 capacitors, resistors. So I'll do all of them the same way as this one. So what I do, I turn the board round, do the other end, then we revisit this first end. Right, so as you can see, I've turned the board round, got the components nicely centralised on each pad. So let's get these two joints finished off. Now again, add some flux. Now I'm doing these two capacitors with lead-free solder. I've got my iron set to about 375 degrees Celsius. That's the temperature I tend to use for a lot of the lead-free. You may have to up that slightly for some components if you're on ground planes, etc. And for leaded solder I tend to use about 330 degrees Celsius. Now in this video I'm using 0.5mm solder, and I only ever use two sizes, 0.25mm and 0.5. So all I'm going to do, just want solder to go up the face on a nice curved joint. You don't want a bulbous joint, you want to aim for this curve. And that's, as you can see, you've got a lovely curved joint going up both faces. That's what you're looking for, and that can be repeated all the way down. If you was doing this 0402 next to it, I'd even get the same size on that. I'm just going to quickly wipe the flux off on this end so you get a clearer view. Just carefully. I use Ultrasol cleaning fluid, that's widely available from Farnell, RS Components, etc. It's definitely the best cleaning fluid for PCBs I've ever found. That's Ultrasolve if you want to check that one out. So as you can see, you've got two lovely curved joints, and that's what you really want to look for when you're doing this sort of component. So what we do now, we turn it back to the first end and we'll get that end finished. Right, so now as you can see, I've back to the first end that we tacked on. Now we'll just get these two joints finished off. Now again, I'm going in with 0.5mm solder. Let's just aim for that same type of joint as we've got the other end. So all you're going to do, just feed a small amount in. You're looking for that nice curve, as you can see, that's what you got there. So you've got all four joints, same sort of shape, and that's the ideal joint for this sort of component. Like I say, I don't ever preload my pads with solder because you're sort of guessing the amount, and if you want to get really, if you want to improve your soldering sort of going further down the line, try and be sort of, yeah, pretty fussy on this sort of component, and then you can progress to these ones next to it. For example, this is 603 there. So yeah, hopefully you get on well with your journey, and hopefully this video can help you. So anyway, what I'm going to do, I'll put photos up of all the joints and components that I've done throughout this video in various stages. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to progress to another size down from this, similar component, but we're going to do some 0805 resistors. So it's a similar package, just now it's obviously resistor, slightly smaller, so we'll do that one next. Right, so moving on from the 1206 size components you started the video with, this is a more common size you get in today's soldering. These are 0805 size. You've got a mixture of resistors, capacitors. I won't touch too much on the values written on the resistors here. I've showed that in other videos. I've done a complete resistor video talking about codes on the top. And this video is mainly about the most common components, basic components used today, and how to solder them on. So I'm going to show you the method to do these. You're going to get a consistent method from the last component. And that's going to put, if you can get that consistency, it put you in good stead to get a lot of today's common components soldered onto your boards. So what we do, get straight on with soldering these on, and here hopefully you see the consistency. So move on now to the point where these four components fitted to the board. Now I've got one capacitor, 3 resistors. These are the 0805s, and they're very common components. I'll just talk you through how I fit these to the board. First thing I do, I'm going to get some rework flux added to the bare pads first. Now, there's lots of different fluxes on the market. Just try a few out. Everyone's got a different favourite. So what we do, I use a plastic cable tie just to add some flux to the pads. Let's get the components put in position. So I've got one capacitor, 3 resistors. And what I like to do, I always like to put the writing on the resistors the same way as the writing on the board. It just makes it easier to read the values if that's what you need to do when you're inspecting boards, for instance. So as you can see, these are 10 ohms, these resistors. So I've got all 3 the same way, so it's easy to read the values without keep turning the board round. And what I like to do, I don't preload my pads like some people do. I've showed this in other videos. I like to tack these in position on one end. So I'm going to do these with leaded solder. So I've got my iron set to about 330 degrees Celsius. I've got a tiny amount. I'm just going to tack these in position. So just centralise the component. Just do these 2, and then I'll get a small amount more solder to get the other 2 tacked on. This is the first stage of any component like these 0805s. I do this same method for 0603s, 0402s, all the two-ended components like resistors and capacitors. So that's the first stage. You've got a small amount, just tacking them components on. That's the first stage for how to fit me 0805. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to turn this board round and we do the other end properly. Then I'll revisit this first end and finish this off properly. Right, so as you can see, got the components lovely and centralised on each pad. As you can see, nice and flat to the board. And that's what you want to get when you've tacked them on. So we can get this second end soldered up nicely, and then we revisit the first end. So I'm using 0.25mm solder. There's lots of different size solders on the market. If you can get some 0.25mm and 0.5mm, they're the 2 sizes I generally use for most of my soldering. What you're doing is feeding a small amount in at a time. That's all you're looking for. Looking for a lovely curved joint. You've got a nice amount, just giving you a nice curved joint on all 4 of them. As you can see there, that's the finish you want to get. You don't want bulbous joints. If you can get these 0805s looking like that, it will enable you to go all the way down to the small sizes. So what we do now, we revisit the first end and get them soldered up. Right, so I've turned the board back round, and as you can see, these are the first ends we tacked on with just a small amount. Like I say, I don't like to put excess solder on one pad and apply the component to that solder. I like to tack them on with a small amount and then revisit this end after. So just experiment with how you do it, but this is how I find I get really good results. So what we're going to do, just go in. I've just applied a small amount of fresh flux. And you're looking for that nice curved joint. You don't want bulbous joints. That's all you're looking for. So I've got a lovely curve on all four, and that's a perfect finish on both ends. Like I say, try and control your solder amount, and it definitely hold you in good stead going forward. What I do with these, I'll clean these up off camera, put some photos up. If you feel like you need to see more in-depth parts of these videos, I've got lots of videos on my channel showing cleaning processes, etc. So yeah, it's worth visiting some of them, may help you out. So what we do now, I'm just going to move on now to another common component, an SO8 IC. So we'll show you that one now. Moving on from the 0805 resistors, come on to this SO8 IC. Now this device got 8 pins, so you've got your 8 pads on the board. You've got your silk screen mark up there. Now where this mark is, that's going to be pin 1 in that corner there. Sometimes you will get a circular silk screen dot in one corner of the silk screen body, and basically the pad next to it is going to be pad 1. So I'm just going to quickly lay the device loosely in position, and I'll show you the mark on the body and where that goes. Just loosely lay it in position, won't get it dead straight. So what you got your circle on the top of the body, and that's going to be up in this top corner. That's going to be pin 1 up in this corner. So you've got your circle to pin 1. Also along this top edge, you might be able to see a chamfer on the body, and that's also where pin 1 is on that side. So that's the way to get your polarity lined up with the silk screen markings. So anyway, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to change the camera angle. I'm going to do this component with lead free. So I'm going to have my iron set to about 375 degrees Celsius. So what we do, like I say, we'll change the camera angle and get this soldered up. Right, so what I've done here, I've basically changed the camera angle, hopefully you can see it slightly clearer than straight from above. So what I've done, I've already added a small amount of rework flux along all 4 pads on this side. Now I'm just going to get this corner pin tacked in position just to keep the component centralised. One other point I should have said earlier, make sure all the pins aren't sort of bent. Sometimes you'll get one that's pushed down, it basically forces the other 3 pads up in the air. So just lay it on your bare board, just make sure all pads are at an equal height. So what we do, just get that corner pin tacked in position, then we'll do the other 3 properly and then finish that one off after. So just hold the component down. Say normally I'll do one on each side. So it's just got that one tacked in position. Now we can do the 3 above that one and get them finished off nicely. Then we just revisit that first one. So if there's anything you feel like I've missed in this video, I've got other videos on my channel that are showing all the different points like cleaning boards, how much solder sizes, etc., and where you can get some of your stuff. So I've got all 4, as you can see, just got all them 4 nicely soldered on. What I like to look for when I've got ICs like this soldered on, I like to see just the front of the pin just protruding out the solder. I don't like them too bulbous, and I like the solder just to run round the back of the hill, so you should get a nice solder amount right along the pad, right round to the back of the leg. I'll take some photos after this so you can see that quite clearly, but that's the amount you're looking for. So what I'll do, I'll turn this round and we'll do the other 4. Right, so I've turned the board round. As you can see, I've got all 4 pins nicely laid on the board. What I meant to say previously, all the pins should be of an equal height, so you don't get one pressed down further and the other 3 are up in the air. I think I said pads, but obviously I meant the pins. So what I've done, I've already fluxed this again just to speed the video up, and now we'll get this soldered up. So what I'll do, I'll just apply a small amount to my iron tip, and then I put that on the joint, then you apply the solder to that. So let's just try and get the same amount again as previous. So again, just looking for it to run along the pad, round the back. As you can see, we've got all 4 equally soldered up. So you can just see the front of the pin just protruding out the top of the solder, and that's the perfect amount. That's what I like to get. So if you can manage this, you're going to really, you're really going to improve your soldering sort of going forward. So anyway, what I'm going to do, I'm going to clean this up in a sec, and then we'll show you the finished joints. Right, so what I've quickly done off camera, I removed all the flux from along that row of joints you can see on your screen. Just take this corner pin for example. What you're looking for, you've got a nice amount of solder going right along the joint, coming out the back of the leg in a nice curved shape. That's a perfect amount of solder on that pin. So if you can get your joints looking like that, it's going to put you in good stead moving forward when you do more difficult devices. So what we do now, I'll move on to the next component, and hopefully you enjoy that one. Moving on now to the final device within the first half of the videos. This one's a rectifier. Now as you can see, the board's got a large plane that the device is going to solder to, and there's a large pad underneath the device. So you're going to need a lot more heat to get this end of the device soldered up. The two joints around here I'm going to do with the same tip, and I'm going to use a large flat-sided hoof tip to do all these three joints. The small conical I've used previously wouldn't be able to get this on successfully. So they're the two soldering iron tips I generally use, a small conical and a large flat-sided hoof tip. I'm going to do this with lead-free solder, so I've got my iron set to about 380 degrees again. So let's get straight underway with placing this. Now you can get these with 2 legs, 3 legs, 8 legs. I've seen sort of 6-leg ones. This is just a 2-leg example. So there's many different variations on this one, but you're going to need a larger tip to fit most of these. Anyway, let's get straight underway. Right, so as you can see, I've centralised the component on the pads. I've got the pins nicely lined up. Now I'm just going to get these soldered up. So basically I'm going to hold the component down, just going to lay my hoof tip on the top there. Should get some solder, so that's put a light amount of solder on that one. I can revisit that one in a minute. Now I'm just going to use for this one, you can use either of the two sizes I like to use, 0.25 or 0.5mm. Just for the video on this end I'm going to use the 0.25, and I'll use the larger size when I do the large pad up the other end. Let's just enter this and get this soldered up. Just looking for that amount to go right around the hole of the pin. Just lay my hoof tip on there and let it flow round. That's all I'm looking for. So I've got a nice amount going right round the whole pin, and that's 2 nice joints. So yeah, if you can aim for that, you will definitely be in a good place. So anyway, we turn the component round. We do the large pad at the other end. Right, so as you can see, I've turned the board round and got the component nicely centralised. I've added some flux already. So let's get this one soldered up. Now if you ever get gold coloured pads, you can apply some solder first and just braid it off, just to aid the flow underneath the body, because sometimes gold pads, the solder can just build up at the end. So anyway, I'm going to go in again. I've got a slightly larger size solder this time, 0.5mm. So let's get this soldered up now. I'm going to lay my hoof tip on the end. This will take quite a bit of time because it's a large plane under there. You've got a lot to warm up here. You're just looking to keep feeding the solder in. It's going to spread down into the pad underneath the device. Now the pad's quite central to this device, so you might not get solder flowing right out to the sides. So you do, just keep going like this. I'm going to get a nice flow right underneath. I think that's probably going to do it now. Once it starts building up on the end, that's the time to generally stop. Right, so I'm happy with that. Let's just take that away. And that's what I'm looking for. So I've got a nice flow underneath, plenty of solder applied. That's going to give you a really good connection underneath. I'll quickly just wipe some of that flux away, you can see it clearer. So yeah, this component does take quite a while to get all that off. the flux and stuff. So yeah, just be patient. It's like applying the solder as well, just be patient with that. It's got some of the flux off, as you can see, so you've got a nice fill. You can still see the outline of the body. You've got the heat applied, plenty of solder underneath, and that's what you're looking for. So this is just a good example of why you need a larger size tip. So anyway, what I'll do now, I'll put some photographs up of the first devices we've shown, and then I'll show you a few more components within the second half. Right, so following on from the photographs, come on to the first video in the second half. Now, got two resistor networks here, RM14 and RM13. Resistor networks again are a very common component. That's why I'm showing it in this video. It's a one body component made up, this one for instance is a four-way resistor network, so you've got four separate resistors all built into the same body going across these pads. If you haven't got a resistor network, you can place four individual ones, like I say, going across the pads, and you will get the same result. So like I say, it's a very common component, it's quite easy to fit. That's what we do. Get some flux added to the pads and we'll get these fitted. Right, so move on now to getting the networks fitted. Now, I've already added some rework flux just to speed the video up. Let's get the components laid in position. This package size, if you was doing these ones individually, these are 0603 size. So just get them laid in position. And as in all the other videos earlier, it's quite a common method. There's so many surface mount components that it's quite daunting, but most of the components can just be tacked on and done in the same manner. And it's the same with these ones. So just centralise your pads to the pins. Make sure you're happy, then just tack one pad on. I'll normally start with the one I've just done there, and then I'll solder it up from the other end. Let's just get this bottom one on this one done. Again, centralise the body. Once you're happy, just get that tacked on. As you can see, you've got two joints holding that perfectly straight. Now we can go in and solder the other ones properly. Shouldn't need any more flux. I'm going to apply a small amount to my iron. Now this is lead free again, so I've got the iron set to about 370 degrees Celsius. Don't need too much. Again, you're going to try and get that curved joint. Try and get it controlled. Just do this one now. So I'm quite happy with them. I've got 8 nice joints with that nice curved shape I was saying about earlier. You've got there's no shorts in between. That's the main thing. Make sure you see the white ceramic in between the pins, and you know you've got no shorts. And you've got that nice curve top to bottom. So that's how easy it is. Tack it in position, go along the line. Once you're happy, turn the component round, and we'll get the other side soldered up. Right, so as you can see, got all the pads and the pins all lined up nicely, all centralised. So we're going to add some fresh flux just along both rows, and we'll get these soldered up. That's the main thing. Take your time lining the component up. That's half the battle. Just get it lined up so it's good well on the pads as you can get. Now we just go in with some fresh solder and get these soldered up. So again, I'm just going to add a small amount onto my iron tip and get these done. So again, Just take your time, looking for that nice curve again. Get the top of that one done. You can always revisit these after. Let's just do this one. We've got a nice amount on all them 8 joints as well. As you can see, you can clearly see the white part between all the pins. So you've got no short circuits, you've got a nice amount on every one, and that's what you're looking for. So just take your time, be patient, and you will get results like this. So what I'll do, I'll clean all these up as well. I'll just actually give these a quick clean now. I use a cleaning fluid called Ultrasol. I've done videos on that. It's really good stuff. Farnell, RS components, etc. You can find that. So what we do, just give this a quick clean. Just going to go carefully, just with a pair of tweezers and a cloth. Quite a blunt pair of tweezers, so I won't scratch the board. Just get some of the flux off, see what the results look like without the flux there. So this is lead-free solder, even though it's really shiny. It's supplied by a company in England called BLT Circuits, SN100SB. This is the type of joint you get, really shiny, lovely joints. As you can see, got a great result. So yeah, take your time, be patient, you will get results like this. Anyway, what I'll do now, I'm going to move on to some plastic bodied components. I just want to talk a small amount about them. So moving on now to this 2-pin connector. Now, I'm going to show you the process of how I fit these quite safely. If you use the wrong iron tip, the heat can travel through these end lugs, for instance, and can melt the plastic quite badly. It's the same with the 2 pins inside, the connecting pins. Too much heat travel up them and they can melt the plastic body, and the pins can become misaligned. So I'll take you through the process of how I do it. Hope you find this one useful. So what we do, get this placed in position, then we'll get this soldered up. So I've centralised the connector on all 4 pads, the 2 round the back and the 2 fixing lugs at the ends. So small amount of rework flux just added around the lugs that runs underneath the end fixing connection. And just get this soldered up. Now if I'm careful, this will stay in position without holding it down. You can actually put your tip slightly away and it should run under. So I'm happy with the amount I've got there. Hopefully you can see got solder all down the side of that, right around the front of it. So I'm quite happy with that connection. So we get the other 3 soldered up and take a look. Now I'm using a small conical tip to fit this connector. This is the main thing I want to talk about. If you were to use a large flat-sided tip, for instance, the heat can be too much for this type of plastic. It can melt the body. You can get moving pins inside. So this is the size of tip I would use on this sort of connector. I'll just quickly get these back to soldered up. Again, small amount of flux just added along the pins. So yeah, always when you get a connector, just try and judge what size tip you need. You can do serious damage if you use one that's too big or too small, for instance. But the more you do it, you will get quite experienced and you will learn what connections need what size tips. So I've got solder right along them, as you can see. That's just what I'm looking for on them too. What I'll do, I'll just change the camera angle and we'll get the other lug soldered up. Camera angle, so let's get this last fixing lug soldered up. So again, small amount of rework flux underneath the lug. So yeah, using a small conical tip on this type of connector is the ideal size. It's going to do, the heat's going to travel up the lug a lot less than using a large flat-sided one. That's all you're looking for. Got a nice amount that's gone right underneath the lug, giving that a good fixing. I'm just going to bring a large flat-sided tip into view, and this is one that I wouldn't use for this sort of connector. The heat that this is going to put into that fixing lug will travel into the plastic, and as it's a very soft plastic, it will melt it. And if you did that on the 2 pins around the back, you will make them become misaligned, and the cable that's plugging in there potentially won't plug in. So yeah, choose your tip carefully when you're doing these type of connectors and you should be okay. Anyway, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to move on to the last component within these videos, a QFP. That's a quad flat pack, so we'll show you that one now. Right, so the final component I'm going to show in these videos is this 64 pin quad flat pack. It's a QFP. There's your pin 1 marker there, right next to pin 1. You can get a small circular dot in this corner denoting the same pin, or a chamfered corner on the silk screen, but in this case there's your pin 1 marker. So this one's actually quite a bit finer pitched than the SO8 earlier in the videos. So I'm going to show you a fairly consistent method to how we fitted that. So what we do, get straight on with the placement and the soldering of this, and yeah, hopefully enjoy this one. Right, so what I've quickly done, I've tacked 1 pin on round the opposite side to the one you can see on your screen. So I'm just going to get this this row soldered up. So I'm just going to gently run a bead of flux right along the row. Now I'm going to get the bottom pin just tacked on with a small amount of solder, and then we go right down the row and get them soldered up. Each on a small amount of solder. Just going to tack this 1 pin in position, and then we can complete the row. So just take your time with these. I tend to go down 1 pin at a time. Some people like to drag solder. This is definitely a case for this IC, this pin size, to try and get yourself some 0.25 solder. All I do, lay my iron on there. You can do 1 or 2 pins at a time. Doing this with leaded solder. I'm just going in and out with no short circuits. I've got a nice bead of solder on every joint there with no shorts in between. So that's how easy it is. You can drag solder, but that's more for this, probably more skilled solderers. But for someone starting off, this is quite a good method, pin at a time. You're going to get a good result like that. So I'll just quickly turn it around. We'll do a couple more rows, and then I'll clean it up and take some photos. So come on to side 2. As you can see, the pins are nicely lined up on the pads. I've already pre-fluxed these just to speed the video up. So let's get this soldered up. Now I just mentioned drag soldering. Probably both methods are of similar difficulty. This is just the method I prefer. So yeah, it's just, they're the main 2 methods, drag soldering or pin by pin. What I do is got a small amount of my iron tip, and this go into these pins. I just like to feed them 1 at a time. As you can see, I'm getting an equal amount on every pin. It's gone right down that row. As you can see, again, no short circuits, nice result right along the row. And that's what I'm looking for when I do my fine pitch IC joints. You can still see the front of the pin, and that's the ideal joint. So I'll quickly turn this round. We'll do the other 2 sides. Like I say, we'll then put some photos up. So let's turn it around and do the next side. So I've actually done the 3rd side just off camera. That's the side in between, down here in between the crystal and the body there. It's very hard to get my camera in there, so I've just quickly done that off camera. So we'll move on to the final side now. So again, I've pre-fluxed it. So the main thing to take away from these videos is try and get yourself 2 different size solders, and I generally use 2 different size iron tips for most of my soldering work. A fine conical tip like this, or the large flat-sided one we used earlier. So they're the two I mainly use, and I find I can do most of the soldering work that I have to do just with them two tips. So yeah, a couple of different tips, two different size solders, and you're going to be well set up to do most of your work. So as you can see, really easy, gone along the road, pin at a time, great result. Like I say, I'll clean all this up, put some photos up. Anyway, that concludes all these videos. Hope you enjoyed the video and learnt something from it. Thanks for all your time and effort and support. And yeah, it's really kind of you to tune in and watch my videos and leave me some really nice comments at times. So it's much appreciated. Anyway, until next time, enjoy your soldering and take care.